Hello, guys. Welcome back. So, though as expected, the Indiana Fever did not lose Sophie Cunningham in the expansion situation, and that is honestly one of the biggest takeaways here. They did not lose Sophie, and that matters a lot more than people might initially realize. There was always a possibility that she could be taken, or that Indiana might risk losing her, depending on how the protection list worked, but it looks like the Fever made sure that didn't happen. From what people have been saying, it sounds like the Fever did not protect Michaela Timpson, and that decision has raised a few eyebrows. But at the same time, protecting Sophie over Timpson probably makes sense when you look at the roster and the timeline the team is trying to operate on. When you think about it in hindsight, the decision feels a lot more logical. Hindsight is always 20/20, but if you're the Fever and you're looking at your current roster and the pieces you already have, keeping someone like Sophie Cunningham around becomes pretty important. She fits into what they're trying to build and brings experience and toughness to the roster. And when you start looking at the other moves that were made in the expansion draft, some of them were honestly surprising. I still cannot believe that Christy Wallace ended up getting taken, even though it was something that had been predicted as a possibility. It felt unlikely at first, but when you really look at the situation, it was definitely within the range of outcomes. The expansion teams are clearly trying to build competitive rosters right away. If you look at what the Chicago Sky have been doing in recent years, they've shown that teams in this league are not afraid to put things together quickly and try to win. And when you look at the roster being built by the Toronto Tempo, there are people who genuinely believe they could become competitive faster than expected. That's the nature of expansion drafts in the WNBA. Sometimes teams end up with a surprisingly strong group of players simply because other teams can't protect everyone. Still, the biggest positive outcome for the Fever is that Sophie Cunningham stayed. That alone is a win for them. There was always a chance that she could have been taken, especially when you consider how unrestricted free agents can factor into these drafts. If a team thinks they can sign a player or convince them to join, they might take a chance. But ultimately, that didn't happen here. For example, someone like Bridget Carlton being selected raised a lot of questions. She's a solid player, but she's not on the same level as someone like Marina Mabrey. That's just the reality of the situation. Mabrey has proven herself as a much more impactful offensive player in the league. So when Carlton was taken, people started wondering if there were other motivations behind the pick. Was it purely about roster fit? Was it about availability? Or was it something else entirely? Those are the kinds of questions that naturally come up during expansion drafts because the strategy isn't always obvious from the outside. Another funny moment from all of this came from the Fever's thank you post to Chloe Bibby. If you saw the graphic they posted, it was pretty clear that the image had been photoshopped. She was basically shown wearing an Indiana Fever jersey, even though the original picture looked like it came from a different uniform. Anyone who has seen those AI-generated jersey swaps could immediately recognize what it looked like. It reminded people of similar edits floating around online, including ones involving Kate Martin. These kinds of edits have become pretty common in sports discussions online. But when you step back and look at the bigger picture, the Fever are actually in a decent position right now. They still have the core pieces of their roster intact. If everything goes the way many people expect, the main group of players will still be together next season. That includes Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hull, and Sophie Cunningham. That core is still there, and that's a strong foundation to build around moving forward. The big question now is what the Fever will do with their draft pick. There's a real possibility that they could trade it. Some people think there's about a 50-50 chance that the team decides to move the pick rather than use it. That's because Indiana might prefer to add a player who can help them immediately, instead of bringing in another rookie who might take time to develop. One idea that has been floated involves reaching out to the Golden State Valkyries about a potential trade. Hypothetically, Indiana could offer the number 10 pick in exchange for a player who already has professional experience. Someone like Ileana Rupert could fit that description. Rupert, playing at the power forward spot next to Aaliyah Boston, could actually make a lot of sense. She has the ability to stretch the floor, she moves well for her size, and she can contribute on the boards. That type of player would complement Boston nicely in the front court. Another interesting detail from the expansion draft was the confusion around Lexi Held. Some people initially thought the pick involved Lexi Hull, which caused a lot of reactions online before everyone realized it was actually Held. Hull is a key part of Indiana's rotation, so losing her would have been a much bigger deal. Fortunately for the Fever, that wasn't the case. When it comes to Timpson, the reality is that her potential as a player is still largely hypothetical. She's extremely athletic, but the production hasn't been there yet. If you watched her play overseas in European competitions, including the EuroLeague, there were games where she struggled to get consistent minutes. In some cases, she was even receiving DNPs, meaning she didn't play at all. That's never a great sign for a player who is still trying to prove themselves. Meanwhile, Bibby has shown that she can at least contribute right now. That's why some people believe she might already be a better player at the moment than Timpson, even if Timpson has more athletic upside. Those are the kinds of evaluations teams have to make when deciding who to protect and who to leave available. There were also a few other surprising decisions around the league. For example, the Los Angeles Sparks choosing not to protect Julie Allemand raised eyebrows. Instead, they protected Azura Stevens, even though there's a possibility that Stevens could leave in free agency. That kind of decision can be risky because you might end up losing a player for nothing. Another case involved Ray Burrell, who ended up being protected instead. These are the kinds of strategic choices that teams have to make during expansion periods, and sometimes they look questionable from the outside. At the end of the day, though, the main takeaway for Indiana is simple. They kept their core together. The Fever didn't lose Sophie Cunningham, and they didn't lose any of their major contributors. Considering how unpredictable expansion drafts can be, that's a pretty good outcome. If the team does decide to run it back with the same group next season, they could be in a strong position. With Caitlin Clark continuing to develop, Aaliyah Boston anchoring the front court, and experienced players like Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham around them, Indiana has a foundation that could continue improving. And that's why the outcome of this draft is actually ideal for the Fever. They avoided losing a key piece, they still have flexibility with their draft pick, and they can move forward with the same core that they were already building around. For Indiana fans, that's probably the best possible scenario coming out of an expansion draft. Don't forget, like and subscribe.